Imagine a world so alien, yet so familiar, that it would make your breath catch in your throat. A planet suspended in a moment of breathtaking transformation, where the very ground beneath your feet pulses with an ancient, primordial energy. This is the Permian period, a time when Earth was nothing like the world we know today, a canvas of geological and biological drama painted in colors we can barely comprehend. The continents themselves were in revolt, a massive landmass called Pangaea emerging from countless millennia of tectonic dance. Massive mountain ranges thrust upward like the spines of sleeping giants, their rocky backs rising from vast inland seas that shimmered under skies of impossible intensity. These were not gentle landscapes, but violent, dynamic environments that challenged every form of life with ruthless precision. Volcanic activity thundered across the planet's surface, massive eruptions that dwarfed anything in modern memory. Imagine clouds of ash so dense they could block sunlight for years, creating apocalyptic conditions that would make survival seem like an impossible dream. The very atmosphere was a cocktail of gases dramatically different from today. Higher concentrations of carbon dioxide transformed the climate into something both terrifying and mesmerizing. In these extreme environments, life was engaged in a constant, brutal negotiation with survival. Plants had evolved remarkable adaptations, woody structures that could withstand intense environmental pressures, root systems that plunged deep into increasingly arid landscapes. Forests of giant lycopsids and massive horsetail-like plants dominated regions that would later become barren deserts, their towering forms creating ecosystems that hosted incredibly diverse life forms. Water became the ultimate currency of existence. Inland seas contracted and expanded like living organisms, creating isolated pockets of marine environments that became crucibles of evolutionary innovation. Coral reefs grew in complex patterns, hosting an incredible diversity of marine life that most people today would find utterly unrecognizable. The temperature variations were extreme and unpredictable. Regions that might have been lush and humid could transform into scorching landscapes within geological timespans. These dramatic shifts created an evolutionary pressure cooker where only the most adaptable organisms could survive. Every creature was continuously redesigning itself, not through conscious choice, but through the ruthless mathematics of natural selection. Imagine the soundscape of this world, a symphony of alien frequencies. The buzzing of massive insects with wingspans that would make modern dragonflies look like mere insects. The deep rumbling of volcanic activity. The strange calls of proto-mammals and reptile-like creatures communicating in languages long since forgotten. This was a world of constant motion, constant transformation. The ground itself was alive with potential energy. Mineral-rich environments created complex chemical interactions that would set the stage for future life. Every rock, every patch of ground was a potential cradle of evolutionary breakthrough. Microorganisms were performing microscopic miracles, creating chemical networks of incredible complexity that would slowly but inexorably shape the future of life on our planet. Predation was not just a survival strategy but an art form of evolutionary complexity. Creatures developed intricate defense mechanisms, armor plating, toxic secretions, camouflage techniques so advanced they would make modern military stealth technology look primitive. Every interaction was a high-stakes game where the prize was survival and the penalty was total extinction. As the Permian progressed, the stage was being set for one of the most dramatic transformations in the history of life. Something was brewing, a change so profound, so catastrophic, that it would reshape the entire planet. The whispers of impending doom were already echoing through these ancient landscapes, a subtle tremor of destruction that would soon become a devastating roar. In the unforgiving theater of the Permian world, survival was not a choice but a relentless, moment-by-moment negotiation with death. Every breath, every movement, every single cellular function was a complex calculation of risk and potential. This was not a gentle environment of peaceful coexistence, but a brutal arena where only the most ingenious and adaptable organisms could hope to persist. Predation transformed from a simple act of hunting into an intricate dance of evolutionary arms race. Imagine creatures locked in a continuous cycle of adaptation and counter-adaptation, where survival depended on split-second innovations that could mean the difference between continuation and total extinction. The creatures of this era were not just animals. They were living laboratories of biological engineering, constantly redesigning themselves in real time. Take, for instance, the remarkable Dimetrodon, a creature that would become an iconic representation of this era's evolutionary complexity. With its massive sail-like dorsal fin, this animal was far more than a simple predator. That remarkable appendage was not just a decorative feature but a sophisticated biological technology. It functioned as a complex thermal regulation system, allowing the creature to heat up quickly in the cold mornings and cool down during scorching afternoons. Imagine a living being that could essentially turn itself into a biological solar panel, absorbing and dispersing heat with remarkable precision. Predators during this period were not simply about raw strength, but about sophisticated hunting strategies that bordered on biological artistry. The marine environments were particularly dramatic battlegrounds of survival. Massive marine reptiles like the Mesosaurus developed incredible sensory systems that allowed them to detect prey through minute vibrations in the water. Their hunting techniques were so advanced that they could track movement through complex underwater currents, essentially creating a three-dimensional hunting map that modern technology would struggle to replicate. Insects during this period were not the small, insignificant creatures we know today. They were giants, literally. Massive dragonflies with wingspans approaching a meter moved through the air like living helicopters. These weren't just flying creatures. They were aerial predators with compound eyes that could process visual information at speeds that would make modern computer systems look primitive. Their hunting strategies involved not just raw speed, but complex aerial maneuvers that allowed them to intercept prey with mathematical precision. The plant world was equally dramatic in its survival strategies. Plants were not passive victims but active participants in this evolutionary war. Many developed complex chemical defenses that could paralyze or kill potential herbivores. Some created toxins so sophisticated that they could target specific predatory insects, essentially creating biological weapons that would selectively neutralize threats. Imagine plants that could chemically communicate with each other, warning neighboring organisms about potential dangers and coordinating defensive strategies. Proto-mammals were emerging during this period, small and seemingly insignificant, but harboring evolutionary potential that would eventually reshape the entire planet. These creatures developed remarkable survival strategies that went beyond physical adaptation. They began developing more sophisticated brain structures, creating social networks, and developing collaborative hunting and survival techniques that would lay the groundwork for future mammalian success. The marine environments were perhaps the most complex battlegrounds of survival. Massive marine reptiles competed with each other in an endless cycle of predation and survival. Creatures like the Mesosaurus developed incredibly sophisticated sensory systems that allowed them to detect prey through minute environmental changes. Their hunting techniques involved not just raw strength, but intricate strategies of tracking, ambushing, and overwhelming prey. Reptile-like creatures were developing incredible camouflage techniques that would make modern military stealth technology look primitive. Some species could change their skin texture and color almost instantaneously, blending into environments with a complexity that seemed almost supernatural. These were not simple color changes, but sophisticated biological mechanisms that involved complex interactions between skin pigments, neural signals, and environmental stimuli. Every single organism was essentially a living experiment in survival. The environment was so harsh, so unpredictable, that only the most adaptable could hope to persist. This was a world where evolution was not a slow, gentle process, but a violent, immediate response to constant environmental challenges. Creatures were not just adapting. They were being continuously redesigned by the most brutal and unforgiving selection process imaginable. As complex ecosystems emerged and collapsed, as predators developed more sophisticated hunting techniques, and prey evolved increasingly complex defensive strategies, something profound was brewing. The whispers of a massive transformation were already echoing through these ancient landscapes. A change so dramatic, so catastrophic, that it would reshape the entire concept of life on our planet. Silence. Not the gentle quiet of a peaceful moment, but the absolute, crushing silence of planetary death. This is the story of the most catastrophic event in the history of life on Earth. A moment when the planet itself seemed to take a breath and then exhale total destruction. The Permian period was drawing to a close, But no one could have predicted the apocalypse that was about to unfold. What began as subtle changes, almost imperceptible shifts in the global ecosystem, would soon transform into the most complete annihilation of life ever witnessed in our planet's 4.5 billion-year history. Scientists would later call it the Great Dying, a name that does little justice to the true horror of what was about to happen. Imagine a world already pushed to its limits. Massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia had been brewing for hundreds of thousands of years, creating a geological time bomb that would soon explode with unimaginable fury. The Siberian traps began to awaken, not with a gentle rumble, but with an eruption that would make every previous volcanic event look like a mere firecracker. Massive lava flows began to cover the landscape, not in hours or days, but in continuous, relentless waves that would ultimately spread over an area larger than the entire continental United States. These were not simple eruptions, but a planetary wound that would spew forth millions of cubic kilometers of molten rock, toxic gases, and destruction. Sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide billowed into the atmosphere, creating a perfect storm of environmental collapse. The atmosphere itself became a weapon. Massive quantities of greenhouse gases trapped heat with unprecedented intensity. Global temperatures began to rise at a rate that would make modern climate change look like a minor temperature fluctuation. The oceans, once teeming with life, began to transform into toxic, oxygen-depleted graveyards. Marine ecosystems were the first to feel the full force of this planetary meltdown. Oceans became increasingly acidic, with oxygen levels dropping to catastrophic levels. Imagine vast stretches of ocean turning into dead zones, where the water itself became a poison. Marine creatures that had survived for millions of years suddenly found themselves trapped in a liquid death chamber, unable to escape or adapt quickly enough. On land, the situation was equally apocalyptic. Forests that had stood for millions of years began to die. The complex ecosystems that had taken eons to develop collapsed with shocking speed. Plants that had developed sophisticated survival mechanisms over millions of years suddenly found themselves unable to cope with the rapid environmental changes. Entire continents became virtual wastelands, with temperatures rising to levels that made survival impossible for most complex life forms. The speed of destruction was perhaps the most terrifying aspect. This was not a gradual decline, but a planetary reset button being pressed with brutal efficiency. Estimates suggest that up to 96% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species were wiped out. These are not just numbers, they represent entire branches of the tree of life, millions of years of evolutionary history erased in what amounts to a geological instant. Creatures that had survived previous environmental challenges found themselves completely overwhelmed. The Dimetrodons, those iconic sail-backed predators, disappeared. Entire groups of marine reptiles were wiped from existence. Complex ecosystems that had taken millions of years to develop were reduced to near-total destruction in a geological blink of an eye. The aftermath was perhaps even more haunting than the event itself. For millions of years after the Great Dying, the planet was essentially a dead zone. Vast stretches of land remained barren, oceans were essentially lifeless, and the few survivors were pushed to the absolute margins of existence. This was not just an extinction event, it was a planetary reset that would reshape the entire future of life on Earth. Yet, in this absolute darkness, the seeds of future life were already beginning to take root. The few survivors, those incredibly rare organisms that managed to endure the most complete environmental apocalypse in planetary history, would become the ancestors of everything that would follow. Dinosaurs, mammals, birds, the entire future of life on our planet was compressed into those handful of species that managed to survive the unimaginable. The Great Dying was more than just an extinction event. It was a moment when life itself was put to the ultimate test, a planetary challenge that would determine the entire future trajectory of evolution on Earth.